Welcome to the free ASTQB webinar. This webinar session is regarding the new mobile testing syllabus. The ASTQB has created a mobile testing syllabus and will be offering a certification exam for those interested in learning more about becoming a mobile application tester. Today we will learn about the key points in the syllabus and more about when it will be available. Our speaker today, Judy McKay, will cover the main points of the syllabus, the overall focus and plan, and we'll discuss availability dates. Judy is the president of ASTQB and has spent the last 20+ years working in the high-tech industry with particular focus on software quality assurance and software testing. She has managed departments encompassing all aspects of the software lifecycle, including requirements design and analysis, software development, database design, software quality assurance, software testing, technical support, professional services, configuration management, technical publications, and software licensing. At this point, I would like to turn it over to Judy so she can take you through our new mobile testing syllabus. Judy.
Thanks, Dave. Hi, everybody. Hopefully it's a better time where you are than where I am, but I see I've got some international folks on here, so it could be 2 in the morning. I don't know. So welcome to our presentation here about the ASTQB Mobile Tester Certification. This is our big announcement, which is why we have the heralding angel here on our first slide. We've been asked a number of times of why are we doing this now? And honestly, we had a number of requests from our certification holders saying, look, I got stuck in the mobile world. I don't know what to do. I'm not good at this. I need some background. I need a nice, easy place where I can just get the information so that I can be effective in my job. And honestly, there's just this growing need for mobile testers. And, mobile is everywhere. It's expanding. It's constant, and it's just not going to go away. It's just one of those things that's getting bigger and bigger very, very rapidly. And even traditional applications now have a mobile presence. So even if you say, well, I work in a bank, yeah, they've got mobile apps too. There's mobile everywhere for us now. And I'm sure if you're not a mobile tester yet, you're certainly a mobile user. So as you start to experience, defects on your mobile device, this is when we as testers go, you know what, I got to make this better. So we decided maybe we'd help people out and put a syllabus out there that would be effective for mobile testers so we could get the background, the information that we need, and be able to be effective as testers. So we have the need. We've developed this certification mainly so that we could control the content for our audience to make sure that we were hitting what our market needed to have. We can control the exam, make sure that it's a quality exam and that we're able to target it at the knowledge that we think is important that our users walk away from. We can have our training providers can build training materials off this, and we have a number of training providers that we work with but we are also opening this up to, well, pretty much anyone to create a course if they'd like to. We can certify that course for them, make sure that it does match the materials correctly. And what we're really trying to do is make sure that we're building on the knowledge that people have at their ASTQB foundation level. Now, requiring the foundation level certification or not, at this point we're probably not going to require it, but there is a fair amount of overlap of knowledge between there because, as someone told me, the foundation is the foundation. And what we're trying to do is make sure that you take that foundation knowledge, which is much more in a traditional life cycle, a sequential life cycle, and oriented towards traditional kinds of tests, applications, server-based, those kinds of things, and be able to take that knowledge and expand it into the mobile world. Well, so rather than saying, no, this is a radical departure from everything you've ever done, we're saying, let's take the knowledge that you've already got and be able to apply that effectively in the mobile world. So there are lots of types of certifications out there in the world, and as you know, the ASTQB currently offers certifications from ASTQB as well as IQBBA for our business analyst certification. So this is basically just another certification that we're adding to the set that we already offer. We have quite a strong reputation for quality and for experience with creating high-quality syllabi. So an ASTQB developed syllabus. We developed it internally. It's been reviewed by an international community. Actually, we broadened out the review much beyond our doors to make sure that we had good coverage, that we had the right level of information, and to make sure that people at, some of the big mobile vendors basically agreed with what we were saying and that this was the right approach. So this has been reviewed by quite a number of people out there in the world, and then those comments have been folded back in. So when a syllabus is developed, just in case you're wondering how this happens, basically a working group is selected by volunteers. The ASTQB is an all-volunteer organization. And then we select a chair, and then we have the working people, the people that are going to participate in creating the syllabus. Not that the chair doesn't work, sorry, shouldn't put it that way, but those people work together to basically produce the syllabus. And then, we pick from various levels of knowledge, people that can write, people that are industry strong. Sometimes we get both, people that can do both, which is an excellent thing. And from there we develop the syllabus. And then once it's developed, then we do internal reviews, meaning that this is kept close, between the people on the ASTQB as well as some of our partners and people that we work very closely with. So first it has that internal review to make sure it's kind of an alpha basically. And then we go out for basically a beta test out there with external reviews and make sure that we get those comments back, incorporate those comments in, make sure that we've still got a solid document and something that's internally consistent. And that can be quite difficult when you've got hundreds of comments coming in to make sure that you've really got everything still consistent within the syllabus and it's still sending the message that you want to send. Because of course there's all sorts of different opinions of which way it should go. And then the syllabus is ready and you're ready to produce it. So I was thinking, maybe we're being kind of pushy here, developing our own syllabus. But then I really kind of thought about it. And if you look at the syllabi that are out there from the ASTQB and the IQBBA, we've had a hand in almost all of them. In the foundation syllabus, we've been authors. This is just in the ASTQB. For the advanced test analyst syllabus, I was actually the chair and one of the authors. For advanced technical test analyst, we were authors on that syllabus. For advanced test manager, Rex was the chair and there were authors. I was one of those. For expert test manager, again, Rex was the chair and several of us were authors on there. For advanced test automation, Andrew Polner was the chair. We had authors in the group as well. Advanced security, Randy Rice is the chair. We had authors from the group. And for the IQBBA, we had a contributing editor on our board that was actually working with that syllabus. So we have had a hand in most of the major syllabi that the ASTQB has released, which is actually good. So our experience is quite good and quite strong. And we know how to create a syllabus. We know how to put one together. We know how to review it and make sure that what we're producing is really a quality document. And that's very important to us. Now, when we look at the ASTQB adoption of this syllabus, they may or may not choose to adopt the syllabus. We won't know that until about March of 2016. But the present offering that we're making from the ASTQB is a worldwide offering. It'll be an ASTQB certification. And the syllabus already conforms to ASTQB standards, so it's basically is a ready-to-go kind of thing. We wouldn't have to go in and rewrite it or reorganize it or do any of those things to make it an ASTQB acceptable syllabus. Now, when we write a syllabus, the first thing we do is we think, why would anybody pay to take this exam? And that comes out to saying, well, what are the business objectives from the syllabus? If somebody takes this and they've done the class or they've done their own self-study and they've got all the concepts down, what would the business expect to get from that person? And then we basically define these business objectives. So MOB, this is for mobile, not for MOB. So the mobile syllabus, first business objective there, they should be able to identify and mitigate the challenges that face a mobile application tester. Okay, so first of all, they know what the challenges are, and second, they know how to deal with them. And this is, I think, one of the problems for mobile testers, especially when you're coming from the traditional world. It's different. There's so many different things that face you, And if you're not aware of that, it's really easy to go back to traditional testing and say, oh, yeah, the application's working, and forget all about dealing with all the network issues, for example, or the connectivity issues. The second one, be able to plan, design, and implement appropriate test cases for mobile applications. Again, taking into consideration the mobile aspects of it, not just that it's software that needs to be tested. The third one, work with other team members to identify and assess risks and to implement a testing solution to help mitigate those risks. And as I'll talk about when we get into the content, mobile applications tend to have quite a short lifespan from basically the time that it's developed to the time that it's released in the market to the time it actually goes away because it doesn't have enough capabilities anymore, or perhaps has a major enhancement put into it. So identifying risks has to be done very quickly, accurately, of course, but the risks change dramatically and very, very fast in the mobile market. Number 4, identify the applicable quality characteristics for a mobile app and identify an appropriate testing approach to address those characteristics. These are things like dealing with performance, dealing with usability, all those things that are so important in a mobile application and maybe not so important in a traditional application, especially like when you have to use at work every day. You're kind of stuck with it. It's not like you can say, you know what, I am not going to use the Oracle Financials package because I don't like it. Not really going to happen. But on your mobile phone, you download your app, you say, this is stupid, I'm not going to use this one, I'll just download another one. So we have that, the whole audience is changing much more rapidly, which means we got to really worry about those non-functional kinds of things and make sure that we're addressing those correctly, because it's really easy to lose your customers. The fifth one, really important part here, participate in the tool analysis and selection to get the most appropriate tools. If you don't have the right tools for mobile testing, it's very, very difficult to do because you've got to use the right simulators or emulators to be able to create the environment that what your users are really going to see. You've got potentially hundreds of thousands of users. You've got all different kinds of networks and connectivity going on. It's just something that it's so different from the way that you would test a traditional application that's going to sit there on a server and behave itself. Well, or maybe not behave itself, but it's going to be there. The sixth one here, identify areas for non-functional testing, prepare appropriate tests. So we just discussed that. Understand the differences between the various mobile application types, and then understand how that affects the tools you want to use, the techniques, and how you would approach the testing. Effectively employ the simulators, emulators, and of course the cloud. The cloud becomes very important for testing mobile devices and will only become more important. Got to say, one of the difficulties with creating the syllabus is dealing with such a moving kind of market. What's valid today is probably not going to be valid in a year. Things change so quickly. But the good news is the tools change very quickly too, so we're able to get a lot more capability. And then the last one, participate in planning for the future. Figuring out the tools. What are my best tools that are going to make me somewhat future-proof? How am I going to get the right level of maintainability? Because I don't want this thing to be absolutely solid. I'm going to be able to maintain this forever. Probably not going to need to. But what is the right mix of making this thing strong enough so it's not going to be a maintenance nightmare for me, yet not building in such rock-solid maintainability that it took me too long to get it out there? So very, very fine line in mobile. So those are our business objectives. This is what we expect someone who comes out as a certified mobile tester, this is what they should be able to give to the business. This is also what you give to your manager and say, hey, I'd like to go get this certification. This is what you'll get. It'll be great. Now, the syllabus has what are called learning objectives, which means this is what we would expect you to learn as you go through this. Now, they're divided into 4 levels. Level 1 is called a K1, and we'll see this as we look at the learning objectives themselves. But a K1 means this is something that you should be able to recognize, remember, or recall, basically. Kind of identify it when it comes up. A lot of these are like definitions, wording, new terminology. There's a lot of terminology in mobile that, it's kind of like with Agile. It's not that the terminology is so hard, but there's an expectation that you know it. And if you don't know it, then you tend to lose a lot of credibility as a tester. which is a big problem for us, right? Because the developers have often been working in this environment longer and they've got the whole lingo down. And if we come in as a tester and say, now what's a native device? They're going to go, really? Are you really that dumb? So you want to be careful that you've got the terminology because there's a lot of credibility to having the right terminology. So just something to remember. Understand, this is where you can basically select or explain how something works or what something is. You can summarize it, differentiate it. Basically, you know, you understand it. You know what it is. You understand it. The level, the K3 means that you can apply your knowledge. If given a particular scenario, you can apply your knowledge to that scenario and solve a problem. So if you're given a particular scenario, you're able to say, well, this would be the right test technique to use, or this would be the right environment to use. And then a K4 is you're able to analyze the situation. You're able to figure out what is the right approach for this, and then how would I apply my solution. So it's a K4 and a K3 all combined together. So that's the learning objectives, just so that you can kind of understand the level of knowledge that we're expecting you to get out of each section of the syllabus. Now the syllabus itself, it's got 5 chapters in it. First one is an introduction, 75 minutes for that. Goes into the test planning and design for an hour. The quality characteristics that we need to consider for mobile testing. The environment and tools. Obviously those 2 are the core of the syllabus there. And then future proofing. How do we think about planning for the future? How do we test for the future? Now, you see each one of these has a time allocation, and what that is an idea of how much a training class should take for each one of these sections. So you would expect a training class to spend an hour on chapter 2. And that's just a guideline based on the knowledge that you should come out with. So that's where that timing comes from. This roughs out to about 14 hours of training time. Now, so if you're taking a class, that a training provider is offering, you would expect it to be a 14-hour class. If you're doing an online course, same kind of thing. You'd expect it to be 14 hours of fascinating time that you're going to spend listening to recordings. I know because I record these online courses. They can't be that interesting when I record them. Sorry, I try to make them interesting, but it's hard to talk to yourself for that length of time. So that gives you roughly the feel for how this syllabus is oriented. 2 days is the guideline from the ASTQB, and that's what we kept to with this syllabus. They're very, very strict about wanting to have a 2-day basically course length. Now with that in mind, that's a fairly severe limitation on how much content you can put in. So it's important to remember that this is a foundation level syllabus. It's oriented towards the basic knowledge. It doesn't go into the esoteric ways of testing mobile devices. It doesn't go into the fancy tools. It's a foundation. It's setting up your knowledge so that you're able to go forward from there. So we've had some of our review comments saying, oh, yeah, but you didn't talk about this and this and this. Well, yeah, because there's not enough time in 2 days to go into something like that. So very, very much a foundation-focused kind of thing. All right, so chapter 1, go into this in a bit more detail. First section is, of course, what is a mobile application? And one of the things that we struggled with a little bit was, people think in terms of traditional applications and trying to take that knowledge and just kind of apply it into the mobile world so that it makes sense. You can carry forward your knowledge, basically. Now, mobile devices are pretty much anything. Anything, the handheld devices, the dumb mobile phones to the smart mobile phones to tablets and notebooks. And then, of course, you've got things that are specific mobile devices, like the thing the guy who delivers packages uses. And that may be sending back information like, the address, the GPS location. He may be able to take a picture of where he delivered it. I mean, all of those things are considered mobile applications. Software that runs drones. All of these are mobile apps. So it's quite a large world. It's easy to think about phones, but it's really quite a bit larger than that. The expectations for mobile users, and honestly, this is what makes testing so hard and development so hard with mobile applications. Mobile apps aren't a toy. even though it's easy to think of them that way because, you know, you got Angry Birds on your phone, right? It's definitely a toy. But they're becoming critical to daily living. Watch somebody when they lose their mobile phone. You know, you can see this thing as a critical part of their life. And people expect 100% availability. Regardless of what they're doing, regardless of where they are, they expect that thing to be there and to be working for them. They expect usability. Now, remember, mobile users are everybody. You know, everybody's running around with a mobile phone. You've got, you know, people in their 90s. You got 5-year-old kids. You've got everybody with, okay, 5-year-old kids that have parents with a lot of money, I would think, to give them a mobile phone. But you've got these devices everywhere and in the hands of all different kinds of users. You don't have the kind of targeting that you sometimes have with traditional software, where you know, like you're dealing with office workers. You don't have that. You've got everybody as a potential user. So it's a bit different. That device is in everybody's hands. People are very impatient with slow response time. If software isn't usable, it's because the software is stupid. It's not because they can't figure it out. It's because the software is stupid. So, you know, you have these kind of really difficult to please users, even though in something that's you know, a low-cost application. So it's a difficult thing to match, and it's a very difficult thing to test for because you have such a different view from that user than what we're used to doing. Challenges for the testers, other than those, very, very frequent releases. You know, you're looking at usually an agile kind of environment where you've got releases coming out every couple weeks. You've got to be testing those things. You have a market window that's quite small because you may be in a very competitive kind of environment. If you're doing, for example, games, you're dealing in such a competitive environment and so time critical. But on the other hand, if you're doing software that doctors are going to carry around or ambulances are going to have to communicate back to hospitals, you know, that's got time criticality as well as safety critical aspects to it. So we're looking at a lot of things that we would normally be able to kind of partition all together in one device and in one application that we're trying to test. So really it's become so much more difficult for us. Portability and compatibility, huge issues. We've got, you know, things that are going to use traditional websites. They're going to talk back to the websites. We've got mobile applications, which are mobile web applications, which are basically web applications that are running on a mobile device. We've got native mobile applications, which are devices that are written for a specific device. Applications that are written for a specific device. So meaning that they're tuned for it. For example, it might run only on iOS and only on certain versions of smartphones, for example. So you've got all of these things that you've got to consider with where is this thing going to run, how's this thing going to run, and what all is it supposed to run on. You've also got the hybrid apps, which are basically more portable, but also take advantage of some of the native device capabilities. So, you know, it's quite a range of things to test. So whereas, you know, sometimes we don't have to know a lot about the design of the software to test it, now we do. We need to know about the design. We need to know what the target was for it. And we need to know what kind of portability and compatibility issues we need to worry about because they're different. We have this concept of, you know, it's not, was it really made for just this device? But what happens if somebody loads it on a different one? Can they? Or is it just going to reject it, which would be much easier from our standpoint? Or is it supposed to work, or is it kind of going to work? How are we going to deal with that? So we have to understand what the intention was, and then we have to understand what the parameters are of what we need to test. And this is where, again, the terminology becomes so important, and we step into knowing more about design. The necessary skills of the mobile tester. Well, obviously we still have the same skills we need: requirements analysis, test design, test implementation, all those things. But we also need to be looking at things for the knowledge to do the portability and compatibility testing. Usability, security becomes a big aspect for us here. So we need to broaden out our coverage, and then of course, as with any kind of an agile or a very fast iterative life cycle, a lot more requirement on doing things like automation. So some more technical requirements for what we do. Equipment requirements, well, you've either got to have the device you're testing on, or you've got to have a good simulator for it, or a good emulator if you need to emulate the hardware itself. So it's not a case where we can just test with software. Now we're going to have to deal with the hardware as well. And even if you do use a simulator for some of your testing, you've still got to test on a real device as well. So knowing these equipment requirements, knowing these up front, and knowing these with long enough time to procure them is something that we have to consider as testers. And then life cycle models, I touched on that, but basically we're working in a much faster sort of a life cycle. Now, I mentioned a handheld device that's going in an ambulance, right? That's safety critical, fast life cycle kind of application. So we have to balance these things, the needs of the very fast turnaround with the criticality of the software as well, and make sure that what we're producing is the right level and has the right amount of documentation. Because, it's something that's, I don't care if it's mobile or not, if it's still got to go through the FDA, it's still going to have to go through the FDA. So you're still going to have X amount of documentation to go with it. So we need to understand the life cycle model we're going to use and how that's going to work for us. What kind of documentation we have, what is our moment of involvement, all of the things that we need to think about as testers. And the other thing that I think is important is life cycle models change. And I would be willing to bet that mobile is going to spawn its own life cycles pretty soon. I think it's going to be some kind of a hybrid of Agile, but just because the market is so different, I think there's probably going to be life cycles that are developed based off that. We'll see. We'll get into that in the future section. Okay, our learning objectives here. So again, these are all K2s, meaning that you need to be able to summarize and explain the information coming out of here. So explain the expectations for a mobile application user and how they're going to use that to prioritize tests. Explain the challenges that they're going to have and how the environments and skills, sorry. Summarize the different types of mobile applications. Explain how equivalence partitioning could be used to select devices. So back to our old foundation level techniques, but those are very applicable in the mobile environment. Anytime you're doing things like trying to cut down your tests, trying to speed up your time to market, this is where we need those techniques. And then how the different kinds of development models, lifecycle models work in mobile or don't work, as the case may be. Chapter 2 is all about test planning and design. Talks about figuring out what the functions and the attributes are of the phone. And this is, I think, one of the hardest things because we have very feature-rich I say phones, but any kind of mobile device, right? Some of these things can do a lot of stuff. So we have to understand what we're testing and then how that interfaces with other things that it may be doing. Because, it was one of the early advertisements for Android that it was able to do, you could talk on the phone and you could search the internet at the same time, right? Well, that obviously was corrected pretty quickly by the iOS guys. But there are many tasks going on in a relatively small device. So we need to understand what else is going on and how we use it. How is this, what part are we using versus what parts other things might be using, and how do we need to figure that for our testing? Because we can't say, hey, you know what, the phone works, I'm done. Okay, but does it work when everything else is running as well? Requirements tend to be quite brief. We tend to spend a lot of time figuring out what the goal is, what we're trying to do. And again, if you've got experience in an agile kind of environment, that helps for the mobile environment. Risk assessment. Now, again, because you've got a shorter life cycle, makes sense to do maybe a lighter form of risk analysis. There's a discussion in here about the minimal essential test strategy that's in the syllabus, but basically talks about different ways to approach risk-based testing without having it be a real heavy upfront process. Because again, remember, we don't have a lot of time. We want to do this well, we want to target it well, but we don't want to bog down in a process that's going to be just too heavy for us. So figuring out our risks, very important, and of course understanding what our stakeholders need. Determining our coverage goals. That's always a tough one. Do we go based on requirements? Do we go based on risks? But we've got to cover functions. We've got to maybe look at the code that we're covering. It may be very important to do code coverage, particularly, again, if we've got a safety critical kind of application. The devices, how many different devices do we need to test across? What does our coverage need to be on those? Do we use a shotgun approach and say, you know what, I've got my 100 test cases and I'm going to run 10 of them across 10 different devices? Or do we say, no, I'm going to target on one, and then I'm just going to fan out and do some sanity testing on the other devices? I mean, how are we going to approach this? What kind of coverage are we trying to get? Connectivity is a huge one in mobile devices because, they may be able to switch from a cellular network to a Wi-Fi network. You may have to be able to think something that's moving around. It might be changing cellular networks as it moves around. You have to handle the things like dropping connectivity, reattaching, maybe a bunch of messages that are queuing up while it's dropped. So a lot of concerns in there about thinking about how we're going to do the coverage. And then, of course, we have those pesky things like geography, which could be a factor when we're doing our testing. Something might not work at high altitude, for example. Or, your mobile phone, well, my mobile phone doesn't work at my house, which is a real pain. But because of the way the hills are structured around it, it doesn't work. So, there's all of these things that we've got to figure out for testing to understand how much of this we need to cover in our tests. So this requires a lot more upfront planning than we may have had to do with traditional applications. We really need to be thinking this through. And of course, those pesky users and what they're expecting. Usability, performance, how much do we need to go into that in our testing? Figuring out our test approach, of course. Once we know what our coverage goals are, it makes it a lot easier to figure out our test approach. One kind of flows through to the other. But we do need to consider, of course, getting the environments, getting them set up, procured, and this is where cloud comes in. If this is something that we can set up quickly, that's great. That might give us something that will give us some time back on our actual testing. We need to think about the people that are going to use it. We need to think about the industry context. How is this going to be used in industry? Schedules that we need to conform to. The scope of our project. I mean, what are we trying to do here? And it's very, very easy in mobile testing to get sucked into doing testing beyond what you should be, because there's so much that the device can do, and you want to say, well, what if I put these attachments on this device? What's it going to do then? What if I have a card scanner? Is that going to make a difference in my application? There's a point where you've got to draw the boundaries of your testing. Otherwise, you'll never release it. Not that any of us have the problem giving up software ahead of time. How are we going to evaluate it? And then, of course, what methods are we going to use? Our test methods we're going to use. Identifying our test conditions and setting our scope, again, kind of the same thing, right? What are we going to test? How are we going to figure out when we're done? What is going to be our stopping point there? And regression testing. This is particularly challenging for mobile applications because we've got software that's changing rapidly, but we've got devices that are changing very rapidly as well. So how much regression testing do we do? And how much do we go out and say every time a new version of the device comes out or the new version of its operating system comes out, we've got to go do regression testing across our applications? And at some point, yeah, you do. You've got to do a fair amount of regression testing in this case because you just don't know what you're going to drop, what's going to not work, what's going to work weirdly on a new version. And there have been some newsworthy failures with brand new versions of, wasn't it the smartphone that came out, Apple's iPhone 5, I guess, where the map function wasn't working right. It was getting people lost all over the world. So things like that, you've got to figure out how much regression testing is needed, keeping in mind that this could be a critical application to somebody. I know I use my GPS all the time because I'm a confused driver probably. But, if that thing cuts out on me, or if my phone decides to download a new, new version of something, and suddenly it doesn't work, I'm in real trouble. So even though you might think, that's not really a safety critical application, but it could be, and it certainly could be if you're in the middle of a turn or a traffic circle at the time when it decides to update, and suddenly it says, I don't know where you are. So, there's a lot of things that we've got to consider here with a mobile device, just because we've got such rapid change going on. In the device, in the operating system, in the peripherals, everything is just so quickly changing. And then don't forget, you got that user who may be doing stuff, downloading stuff they shouldn't, denying, not taking releases that they should. You know how those users are. Learning objectives. Explain why use cases are a good source of testing requirements. Describe different approaches to the risk analysis. Explain how the coverage goals are going to influence the level and the type of testing that we're going to do. And then understand how test analysts should take the device and the application into consideration when we're testing or when we're creating the test conditions. Not just the application, but that device. Now remember, most cases we're not testing the device itself, but you do a lot of testing of the device as you're testing the application. It's hard to draw the line. And this is where it's so important to make sure that there's a clear scope for the testing. And this is one of the areas that we'll probably expand on in maybe an advanced syllabus to go into more about the device itself and how to look at the device itself. Chapter 3, our quality characteristics. So as with most things, right, we have the functional testing and then a non-functional testing of this. Functional testing looks at testing for correctness, meaning does it actually do the right thing in the right way? Is it suitable? Is it accurate? Security testing. Now, security testing in mobile is a whole new world because people leave those devices around. And they probably have their bank information on them. Now, there's not much we can do if somebody's just going to leave their device, but because we're dealing with a lot of critical information that may be going back and forth, maybe this is a device that's used by, maybe people that go pick up the money at, different shops and things and take them to the bank, and they need to report their location and they need to report how much money they picked up. You wouldn't want that transmission to be intercepted by evil bandits that are going to go rob the truck because they know they just picked up a $2 million deposit someplace. Right? There's a lot of security concerns because we've got a lot of information flying around over the airwaves here, and we want to make sure that we're basically able to control it, secure it, and make sure that people are able to use these mobile devices to do whatever it is they need to do and do it safely. But unfortunately, we have a lot of security concerns with mobile applications that we may not have with traditional, partly because we've got so much different kinds of network connectivity. We've got the physical security aspects, meaning that, because somebody may leave their phone behind, we want to make darn sure that we didn't leave a password in there unencrypted or something like that. So security is really a whole new area for us to think about, much more so than in a lot of the traditional, in traditional applications, you tend to be, you do your regular testing, and then there's usually security people that come in and do security testing. In mobile, a lot of cases, kind of doing everything. So there's a section in the syllabus that talks about security and how to deal with it. Interoperability is, again, of course, a huge area because we've got to make sure that, we understand what is supposed to work with what. Devices, working with other devices, peripherals that you might be putting on that device, like card scanners or, scan barcode readers, things like that may be on this device, and how those are going to work. And then what if they upgrade some of the peripherals and they don't upgrade the base system? All of those things are considerations in the interoperability that we need to think about. And then, of course, device differences between devices. So even if you've got a device in the same family, it doesn't mean that it's going to have the capabilities that it needs to have to work with a new version of the software. Test design. Again, kind of more the traditional how to design the tests, but with the mobile flavor of the things that we need to consider, like the risk that we have inherent, network connectivity, operating systems, power consumption, the type of application it is. Is it a native? Is it a hybrid app? What kind of a thing are we dealing with there? And then, of course, in test design, there's not a repeat, of course, of the foundation syllabus information about test design techniques, but a bit about how to apply equivalence partitioning and boundary value analysis and decision tables and use cases and experience-based techniques. How can we use those in this environment and use them effectively, of course. And then, of course, our mobile-specific techniques. Just how to conduct exploratory testing in the mobile environment, the kinds of different, doing role-based testing or persona-based testing, those kinds of things, to try to bring that in of how we're actually going to do better usability testing, how we're able to do better performance testing in that kind of environment. Non-functional, and I just crossed over into that, of course. Performance, usability, big ones to think about. And again, as I mentioned, performance is so critical because you end up with a very impatient user and somebody who's going to go, I need it now, and if it's not fast enough, I'm done. I'm going to get another application. Usability. looking at the different ways to approach usability, and again, considering all of our different user types, what they're after, keyboards, does that work for everybody? Can I zoom it when I need to? Does this thing have capability if I need to turn it sideways so that I can see a bigger display, or do I have good lighting in this device? If this is the thing that the guy's using to deliver packages, it's outside a lot, it's exposed to weather. Is it going to work for all of those kinds of things, or is the poor person always going to have to find shade to be able to read their screen? So a lot of things that we need to consider with usability because the device is out and about, it's out being used. Portability testing, looking at making sure that the software is going to be able to run on different devices, being able to port between. A lot of people want to take their applications with them. I've got a new device. I want to just port my applications over with all my data. I don't want to reload them. What a pain, right? Are we going to be able to do that, or is that something where we just, it was never a requirement and we're just not going to support it? Reliability testing, looking at reliability, the kinds of things we need to consider, and this is stuff like, mobile devices have usually run on batteries. Obviously, batteries die. What's it going to do? Is it going to be polite about it? Is it going to allow you to restart? Does it need to give warnings when it's starting to go down? Once it's been down and comes back up again, can it catch up with what happened while it was off the air? So a lot of things we need to worry about with reliability. And you can see here we pick up a K3, being able to apply the best test design technique. And then more, again, in the K1s and the K2s, knowledge, understanding what we need to do. Some new terminology coming in here, test storming, for example, summarizing our device differences. So a lot of that kind of a general knowledge here. And then for the non-functional, again, being able to create a test approach that's going to achieve performance testing goals. And then the same thing, another K3 for usability testing, because those two are so critically important in the mobile world. Chapter 4. The environment and the tools. Big chapter here. And again, foundation level, right? So we're basically setting the foundation. There's so much information to cover out there about this. But basically looking at the kinds of tools that we would use, how those apply to mobile, how we could use generic tools, things like, do we still need test management software? Do we still need defect tracking software to do our testing? And then a little bit about open source tools, because there's always a problem where the commercial companies are running along behind trying to catch up with developing tools for the new world. So in a lot of cases, open source is going to be the way to go, because that's where you're going to find the newer tools that are going to be able to handle more capabilities. Environments and protocols. What do we need to think about with the environment? Connectivity, memory, performance, device capabilities, all of these things that we need to be thinking about. How does it handle data? How does it handle locations? How does it know where it is? And how does it relay that back? And then, of course, what about using things like device labs? What about using cloud? What about using some of those to do our testing? Protocols, lots of different protocols that we need to consider. We don't go into that a lot at this level, but just more of an awareness to make sure that you understand that you need to be thinking about the different protocols in your coverage. Specific environment-based considerations. Is this a browser-based app, native device app, hybrid app? And if so, how do I need to make sure that I'm testing in the right environment? Where do I use simulators? Where do I need to use real devices? Do I need to use an emulator that's actually emulating the hardware, the way the hardware is interacting, or a simulator that's just basically giving the responses in a software form that we would expect? What about using the cloud? Can I use the cloud effectively and safely? And at what point is it right to go with the cloud, or go with basically a vendor-supplied set of devices? How do I get all of these devices that I need to test on? And it's so easy for developers to develop it and say, well, it ought to work. Try it. Well, how? How am I going to find all these different devices out there in the world? And the syllabus at least gives you some places to start looking, and an understanding of how to use simulators, of what they're good for and what they can't do. Whether you should buy one or whether you should build a simulator. What's the right way to go? And then a bit about different forms of simulators and things that are available in the cloud that you can look for and see if those are available to you, and if of course they're available for the kinds of testing that you need to do. A specific section on performance tools and support of performance tools. They tend to be different for the mobile devices than just the traditional performance tools. And you don't. This isn't where you just say, well, I'll just go with Load Runner because Load Runner, has been around forever. Being around forever is not necessarily good in the mobile environment because a lot of those traditional tools really haven't shown the flexibility that they need to have. They haven't really changed as the market has changed. The big commercial tools have a lot of considerations before they release a new one. Sometimes you want to go with the new one on the block, right? It's a brand new tool. It may not have all of the bells and whistles that a Load Runner has, but it may be good enough for what you need. And then test automation. As soon as we've got to do a lot of regression testing, which we do, then we better be thinking about test automation. And we better be thinking about the right tools to do this. And the skills that we're going to need, because of course, you need good skills to do good test automation. You almost always need a good programming capability because a lot of the tools, even if they claim, hey, you know what, black box, it'll be awesome. You just kind of record what you're doing and life will be great. Chances are you're still going to need to do some programming for the stuff that the tool can't really do or can't really do effectively. So, we still need to be realistic with our approach to test automation. We still need to be thinking long-term, using keyword-driven kind of approaches, making sure that what we're building is going to be something that we can maintain and something that will grow with our product as our product changes. So test automation, while you need to be quick, reacting quickly, you don't want to be doing throwaway automation because it's just generally not a good investment unless you have a throwaway application. Maybe you do. Maybe you have an application that you're spinning up for the Rugby World Cup, for example. And that's going to be a short duration, and after that, never going to use it again. Okay, great. That might be a case where you say, you know what, automation, not really worth it. Short-lived app, it's going to live and die, don't care. So not going to have to do much regression testing. It's not going to live beyond this version of the devices. So, it's always a trade-off, right? And it's kind of odd to think about software that could be so short-lived that you wouldn't even care about automation. But some of these mobile apps are. Some of them are very, very targeted, very, very targeted for what they're trying to do. So want to make a good, conscious choice. If you're going to do automation, do it right. But maybe you don't want to do it. So just, again, the syllabus gives a discussion about, when you might want to do it and when you might not want to. And then future-proofing. Just talks about things like getting ready for the incredible growth in the market. There has already been incredible growth. It will continue to be really, really high. But also the demands for this high reliability, the excellent usability, high performance, consistent experience, portability, and a very fast turnaround for fixes and new features. So there's a high demand in this very, very fast growth market. Got to build for change, making sure that you've architected the testing in such a way that it will be flexible. You'll be able to work with new versions, new models, new devices. Make sure that you've got efficient maintenance in place. Make sure your tools are flexible. And if you're going to partner with somebody, for example, maybe you're going to partner with a third party to do some of your way out devices, make sure that this is going to be a partnership that's going to have the flexibility you need as the environment changes. Plan for the future. Make sure that your life cycle models that you're following make sense for what you're doing. Don't try to use a heavyweight model and shove it in there when it's just not appropriate. So it's hard for us as testers sometimes to be flexible about life cycle models, but it's something that we need to do and think about because they're going to change. We have to look at alternative forms of testing, different ways of doing it, testing in the cloud, crowdsourcing. The things that we might not have ever considered with a kind of a traditional application. Whereas now, maybe testing in the wild is what we want to do. Maybe we want to say, I'm going to just tell everybody with a phone to, hey, log into my app and give it a try. Now, obviously, controlling that is quite an adventure, shall we say. But there are alternative sorts of testing that we need to consider with mobile applications. And then, of course, anticipating the future. Which way is it going to go? What's going to become popular? What's going to be important? And making sure that we have the skills, the capabilities, and the environments to handle that. So that's basically the coverage of the syllabus. Obviously, it goes into more depth in those areas, but just to kind of give you an overall look of basically the depth of the syllabus. There's some terms that are defined, of course, some new ones. And again, as I mentioned, sometimes knowing the right term is important for your credibility. So those are defined and explained within the syllabus as well. Now, how does this work? Training isn't required to take the exam. You can self-study. There's publications out there, of course, that are referenced in the syllabus. E-learning and courses are going to be available soon. We know we've already got some training providers developing some of those. So that's already being launched. And of course, there is no requirement to take a course. You can learn on your own, take the exam, that's fine. So I just wanted to emphasize that. In some cases, some organizations will require training in order to be able to actually take their exams. This is like the ASTQB that way, where you can walk in and take it whenever you want. You don't have to actually complete a course. The exam, 40 questions, multiple choice. You're given an hour to take it. Where to take it? So once on-site courses are being offered, the exam would be offered as part of that. You'll be able to take it from a Criterion testing center. It's online. Well, it's not actually online. You go to the testing center and then take the exam from there. And then we will be offering this wherever we are at conferences like STAR conferences and such. We'll be offering an exam session at those places too. So pretty much the ASTQB goes to various conferences at various times, and all that information is up on our website, so you can see when we'll be someplace and when we'll have that offered. So our next steps. We've already had an interest in going on into an advanced level syllabus, actually writing the next generation of this. So again, foundation is for those who are just starting out, willingly or unwillingly, because I think some of us get forced into an environment and go, oh my gosh, now I got to figure out how to do mobile. So advanced will go more into environments, the tools and techniques that are specific to mobile, more into architecture, things that you need to know about the background of it to do maybe more detailed testing. We don't have a time frame yet on that kind of a syllabus. We're also considering adding a practical component to it with using simulators and emulators, for example. But so that's kind of what's kind of brewing in the background of what we're thinking. Nothing committed yet, but just to give you an idea. And then the important things here on the ASTQB website at www.astqb.org, you can download the syllabus. You can download the sample exam. You can download the sample exam answers, which is probably the most important part, with the explanation of why the answer is the answer. And we're going to be putting up a feedback link so that you can give us feedback on the syllabus and on the exam to let us know what you think. And then we'll also be putting up an exam registration link. We expect to have the exam ready for general public consumption here by the end of October. We're working on it right now, but we want to make sure that it's a good quality exam. So might be earlier than that. Certainly watch our website. We'll have announcements coming out when it's available. But for now, the syllabus is out there and the sample exam is out there. So you'll be able to take a look at the syllabus and try out the sample exam and see how your knowledge is looking. And that's all I've got. Dave, you want to take it back?
Great, Judy. Excellent job. That's great information, very helpful all the way around. If anyone has any questions, feel free to submit them to me in writing via the questions box on your screen. Judy, we do have a couple of questions to start off, and the first one would be, can you tell me why the ASTQB decided to create this syllabus, in the first place?
Our main reason actually was because we had a fair amount of requests from our certification holders. We have more than 10,000 certification holders, and they interact with us fairly frequently. And this was one of the things that they kept asking is, look, I'm stuck in a mobile environment, and I don't know enough to do the testing. Can you help me out? Can you guys put together a syllabus? Can you get some training material together? I need to have this. And then we had others that said, I want to move into the mobile testing area, and I'd really like some kind of a certification that would make me a little more marketable in that area.
No, that makes perfect sense. That makes perfect sense. A couple of exam-specific questions. One, do you know what the exam will be called exactly, or what the acronym may be as it comes out?
It'll be a certified mobile tester, foundation level.
Okay, excellent. And what is the passing score for this exam? Do you have a feel for that at this point?
It'll be the same as the ASTQB standard exam, so 65% to pass.
Okay, excellent. And then, so there are other options perhaps out there. So one question came in, what would be the difference of taking this certification instead of another mobile-focused certification?
Well, as ASTQB being part of the ASTQB, we did try to keep it more of an ASTQB type exam, more in line with the foundation, the core foundation syllabus. So feeding on that ASTQB knowledge. So we think it fits nicely within the way that the ASTQB runs exams and the kinds of certifications that they run. But we also felt that this was a good foundation level for people that really wanted to learn more kind of at a broader level about mobile rather than, I know that some vendors offer certification, for example, on specific devices or specific device testing, things like that. And we wanted to say, we're looking at the overall mobile arena, not just an iOS device, for example. So we wanted to kind of broaden it out, make it a good, solid foundation to build on from that. Hopefully that helps.
No, I think that's a perfect answer. I think that there is a great advantage in being part of that ASTQB/ISTQB family. It's sort of that one-stop shopping, but there are a number of benefits that come with ASTQB certification, be they having your name listed on the site as being certified in case employers want to know or future employers want to know that you're certified. Things like the access to the job bank, the career center, the online glossary that ASTQB, that you've created. So I think there are a number of benefits around there. I think that's very helpful. A good question here. So if someone takes the ASTQB exam for the mobile application syllabus before ISTQB validates it in March, at the point that ISTQB does recognize it, will the certification be essentially transferred or on the ISTQB level automatically?
Yeah, that's our expectation, yeah, that this syllabus, as it stands, will be adopted by the ISTQB, or if it's adopted by the ISTQB, then the ASTQB certifications can be converted into ISTQB certifications. That's our understanding.
Okay, and that makes sense. I think there's some precedent for that. Will there be, so we talked a little bit about, or you alluded to a little bit about advanced certifications. Do you see there being any sort of additional certification for managers who are dealing with mobile projects?
Oh, that's a good question. Actually hadn't thought about that yet. We were thinking more of the advanced along the lines of the technical rather than the managerial, but certainly a consideration. And if we get enough feedback that that's an interesting path, we definitely would pursue that as well.
Right. So, and as Judy noted, there will be we'll go ahead and add a feedback link near the syllabus. The syllabus itself, if you go to the ASTQB homepage at astqb.org, down in the popular links section, the third box, if you will, or rectangle, has a link to all of the various syllabi that ASTQB offers on the site. And if you scroll down that into the Foundation Extension section, you will see the link to the syllabi and the sample exam, as well as the sample exam answers that Judy mentioned. But if in the meantime, while we add a link for feedback there, you're certainly welcome to use the main contact form on the ASTQB site that would provide the opportunity to send any feedback, suggestions, or questions to ASTQB headquarters, and they'll make sure that those get to the working group and the technical experts that are focused on the certification. Judy, one other question I have here, and we're just about out of time, so maybe this may be the last one or near the last one. Well, do you envision, at least at this foundation level, will there be CEUs required to maintain this certification?
Will there be what required?
CEUs, continuing education of some sort to maintain the certification for the foundation mobile.
you know, for mobile of all worlds, right? Since things are going to change so rapidly, that would certainly be a consideration. But at this point, we're planning to go with the standard that the ISTQB has, which is that you own your certification for life. That there is no follow-up required or a re-education or anything like that. We certainly could look at revisiting that later on, but right now that's our plan, is to go with basically the ISTQB model on that.
Right, and I think that's maybe one of the advantages of being part of that overall ASTQB and ISTQB family, that you do have other like-minded individuals who are interested in some of these topics that you can exchange information with. Right now, you can do that via Facebook or LinkedIn or whatnot, and that may continue to evolve as the need is out there. But it is moving quickly, so that is a good point. We'll see how that develops. But right, so no CEUs required at this point. Perfect. That's all the questions that I have right now. Judy, I want to again thank you for a very informative webinar. A great job going through this, and I'd also like to thank the audience for joining us again for another free ASTQB webinar. I think there was some great information and some excellent questions that were provided as well. So, Judy, once again, thank you, and we look forward to hearing you speak again soon in another ASTQB webinar.
Oh, thank you, Dave, and thank you everybody for coming.